Today's episode is going to be a bit different than my usual episode. It's completely unscripted. So it's going to be a little bit more raw, and I'm going to try and limit the editing for this episode, but there is a good reason for it. And if you stick around, you'll find out why.
If God is for me, who's against me? Nobody is. I'm so sick of the...
Welcome to Sanctuary Peacemakers. This is your frontline guide to safety and security inside houses of worship with your host, Unity. Now, let's enter the crucible of our discussion. So when I'm not working my full-time job, or when I'm not doing my podcasts or working with my church, I will typically, a lot of times I'll be out teaching various different classes to other churches. And the other day I was invited out to Crosspointe Church in Wayne. For those of you who are not familiar, although I'm sure most, if not all of you, are very familiar with that situation, Crosspointe Church in Wayne was the what's the word I'm looking for? I guess victim of a attempted mass shooter. And it was during VBS when there were a lot of children there, and fortunately, the attempted mass shooter was stopped before he entered the building. He was stopped outside by an usher who hit him with their truck, and then by Jay, who got in a gun battle with him and, ended the individual's life. And I'm familiar with the names of the other individuals, but out of respect for them, I'm not going to give them. The only reason I bring up Jay is because, he's done interviews and, so people are familiar with him already, but I'm not going to give out the names of the other individuals who are involved. But I went out there to do a training on situational awareness and conflict resolution. And during this training, I got an opportunity to see and stand in the places where all of this went down. And let me just say, it was a very surreal and it was an incredible experience. So I was training this class, and, it was a fairly long class, so there were a few different breaks. And during the breaks, I had some of the church members come up to me and talk to me about what their experience was. And it really made me realize that a lot of times when these incidents happen, we may know about a few people, and we think about, oh yeah, there's lots of people involved, but we really don't fully comprehend the other people involved, because there's no names, there's no faces. And to stand there and be talking with all these different individuals and seeing all these people who went through this horrific event, it was very humbling. And it started making me realize everybody there has a story. Everybody there went through this together. They all have a story about where they were, or what they were doing, or what their initial thoughts were. Obviously, I wasn't able to talk to everyone, but I did talk to a couple people, and it really started to kind of put things in perspective for me. Another thing that really got me thinking about some of the things that we don't really think about when we hear about these kind of incidents and these kind of happenings is just how much things affect these people who went through this years later. It was just the 1 year anniversary of the incident the other day. And one of the first things I noticed when I was there, I noticed somebody coming in on crutches. And I don't know how I knew this, but somehow I knew that that was the safety team member who had been shot in the leg. And I later asked Jay about it, and he confirmed that that was the case. And even though it's a year later, this team member is still suffering from the physical scars. He still has a lot of pain, and he's not always able to work because of his pain. And he's still got more surgeries and more that he needs to do before he can be back to some semblance of a normal lifestyle. And you don't think about that kind of thing. You know, we kind of say, oh yeah, these people are going to, it's going to affect them for life, without realizing or without truly thinking about just how true that statement is. And it's not even just true emotionally or mentally, but in a lot of cases it's true physically as well. And it's something that, again, I am very thankful for having had this experience. You know, I think this training that I did the other day in many ways was more for me than it was for them, but in a different way, on a different level. And it was very eye-opening, and it gave me a lot to think about. You know, when I did the interview with Jay, it had been a little while after the incident, you know, and the investigation, I believe at that time, was either pretty much over or it was over. So there wasn't so much that, you know, they knew they were not going to be, you know, getting any trouble with the law or anything, because what they did was absolutely justified. But there are a lot of things that go far beyond that you don't think about. You know, when we talk about an incident and when we train for safety and security and that kind of thing at churches or wherever, you train for the immediate. You train for what to do when a shooter comes in, how to react, and you know, where you need to be and who needs protecting. What we don't train for is everything that comes after. The medical appointments, the surgeries, the investigations, the legal questions, the emotional recovery, and even the challenge of returning to the same place where everything happened. You know, I asked Jay, I think during the interview that I had with him for the podcast, he had mentioned that there were some new members to his church because they figured, you know, if the devil is trying that hard to silence them, then there must be a reason for it. But also that they had kind of lost some members because those members just couldn't bring themselves to come back to the scene of the crime, so to speak. And we don't think about these things. We don't train for these things. We don't prepare for these things. We always prepare for the event itself, but we spend so little time preparing for the long aftermath. It could be months, days, months, years, lifetimes. You know, we don't think about what happens in the aftermath to the injured and their families and witnesses and the congregation and all the different parts that are affected by this. We don't think about people that a year or more later are still having to get surgery for their injuries and aren't able to work. And so I don't know if that's the case with this individual, this team member, but being out of work, that's obviously going to put a financial strain on most people. I don't know his financial situation, and I don't want to speak to it, but even if he's in a great place, he had however much saved up, who knows, there are people that don't have that kind of nest egg, so to speak. And how does this affect other aspects of their life? These are things we don't think about, but we need to. Things we don't consider, but we should. And I'm not trying to keep people from joining a safety ministry, because I think it's absolutely necessary. And, the hand of God was over that church when it happened. There's not a doubt in my mind. But at the same time, these people are affected in a way that you and I, most of us, cannot even imagine. And it's weird in a way, thinking about the fact that everything was cleaned up and now the building is functioning as if it never happened. But to the people in the seats, it did. To the people that attend that church on a regular basis, it did happen. And it happened in a way to them that we who have not been through that cannot fully comprehend. And one of the other things that after the training was all over, and Jay took me through the building. He walked me around and he showed me the different areas where the incident took place. And upon first glance, there's really no signs of what happened there. They cleaned up all the broken glass and they, did their best to kind of mask everything. They did a lot of work cleaning everything up. But upon further inspection, and when it was pointed out, there's a lot more behind it that is kind of hidden. One of the things that Jay brought me outside to, like, the entrance where the individual had come up to. And when I was watching in the reports, or, when I was watching the news coverage about the incident, I was under the impression that it had taken place, 50 yards from the entrance or 50 feet from the entrance, a little ways away from the entrance. Jay pointed out exactly where the shooter went down. And he was within a few steps of being able to walk through a door. And that to me just kind of, when he pointed that out, that brought it into really, really a stark realization of just how close this church was to a much, much worse incident. And then Jay brought me inside back inside the foyer area by that door. And on the back wall in that foyer and on the side walls, there's stone or bricks. And, Jay's pointing to a spot over here. He said, you see that black tape there? I'm like, yeah. He said, yeah, that's a bullet hole. He brought me to the back wall. He said, you see that where it's chipped? The brick is chipped right there? I said, yeah. He said, yeah, that's where a bullet hit. This kind of thing, it really, standing there where everything went down was just, I'm very thankful for that Jay trusted me to be able to show me this kind of stuff, but man, it affected me more than I would have thought it would. Like, I had a hard time sleeping last night. Not so much because, it was bringing up this traumatic event. Like, I didn't go through this like they did. But because I was thinking about all the things that I had never thought about, that had never occurred to me, that we don't think about when we hear about an event like this happening. We don't think about all these things. We hear about, we hear a little bit about the bad news, and then there's these, for this church in particular, there's, for lack of a better term, these hero stories. This Jay saved countless lives from being injured or worse, which he absolutely did. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that he didn't do that. But we kind of focus on these hero stories, and maybe it's just because we don't want to see or hear the grim reality. We don't want it to affect our lives the way it's affecting theirs. So I don't know that there's really much point in me telling you the story of this, and telling you about what I went through, which is nothing, again, compared to what they went through, other than think about these things. Take a moment. Say a prayer for that church. Say a prayer for Jay and his team. Thank God that they made it through. And take a moment to think about how much it really affects things even a year later. I don't know what to say about it. It's like, it's really got me thinking so much, and maybe part of that's my ADHD, but sometimes my brain doesn't shut off, but it's worth thinking a little bit deeper into. But if anybody from Crosspointe does listen to this episode, I do want to give you a special thank you. Number one, thank you for allowing me to come out to your church yesterday and teach. But a bigger thank you for being the church that did things right, and for being the inspiration for doing what I do. A big part of the inspiration. I mean, I started a little bit before that incident happened, but that really gave me the kick in the butt to pursue it a little harder. And I just want to thank you for sharing with me and showing me things that I didn't necessarily think about prior. Because sometimes I think it's important that we stop listening to what the news has to tell us and start listening to what the people who actually experienced it for themselves have to tell us. But I don't know, there's so much more that I could get into and talk about. But a lot of it I think is stuff that I'd like to keep to myself, and a lot of what I could talk about also involves other people, and I don't want to, out of respect for them, I don't want, to give names or give too many details. But it was a good experience, but very eye-opening for me. And I'm very thankful for it.
Fear you are not welcome here.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Sanctuary Peacemakers. If today's conversation added value, be sure to tune in next week as we continue equipping and encouraging those who serve and protect houses of worship. A special thanks to Haley Jones for granting permission to use her song Not Today as our introduction, and to Leslie Jones for allowing us to use the song Sound Mind as our outro music. As always, y'all stay safe and y'all stay blessed.